hidden within all of the storms of your life is the peace that you desire.
Dr. Wayne Dyer presents a new interpretation of an ancient wisdom text, the Tao Te Ching.
Many people call this a manual for achieving a way of life that literally guarantees integrity, joy, peace, and balance in our life. Change your thoughts based upon the wisdom of the Tao, and your life will change.
Join Dr. Dyer as he reveals how to live the wisdom of the Tao and achieve higher consciousness. When Change Your Thoughts, Change Your Life airs next.
Please, thank you so much. It's so wonderful to be back on public television. It's now 10 years we've been creating public television programs. It's been a wonderful journey. I obviously support public television. It's a way to bring higher consciousness to our entire country, and I'm proud and pleased to be here. This is a program about changing your life. Not in the traditional way that we think of when we think about changing our lives. Usually that means changing your behaviors, retraining yourself, getting new habits, going out and trying them out and changing your life. This is about changing your thoughts, and then your life will change. Change your thoughts, change your life. It's the name of this program, it's the name of the book. It is something that I very strongly endorse, that we have within us the ability and the capacity through the way that we use our minds and the way that we process things and events to make our lives totally shift and change around. And I can tell you that it doesn't make any difference what age you are, whether you're a teenager watching this, or whether you're someone in your 60s, 70s, 80s, or anywhere along the way, you can make that change. And I'll tell you, it happened for me. 2 years ago, on the 10th of May, I turned 65. And the next day, on the 11th of May, I had a life-changing thing take place for me. I changed the way that I was thinking about who I am, about what kind of a man I am, about what kind of a person I intend to be for the rest of my life and where I'm going. And something began to resonate with me that I had to make a shift and make a change at the age of 65. I had a wonderful office, which was really a townhouse. It was filled with over 20,000 books. It was filled with clothing. It was filled with records of all kinds. It had pictures on the wall. I had awards that I had received over the years, and everything that I had accumulated, literally, in this physical world, had accumulated in that office. I turned the key and handed it to my manager, Maya, who's been with me for almost 30 years, and I said, I would like you to sell everything or distribute everything that's in there. Sell the townhouse, get rid of it. Take all the records, all the books. I got rid of my shoes. And I left it all behind and turned it over to her to get rid of everything. I detached myself from a lifetime of accumulations. And I moved full-time to a place over in the middle of the Pacific Ocean on one of our great islands called Maui. And in the next months, I began to get a lot of things coming to me about what my life was to unfold, things that I wasn't even expecting. And I think about this idea about what age you are and whether or not changes and shifts can be made, and how difficult so many people attribute this to, they say it's just, that's an impossibility. I couldn't possibly do that. I'm so attached to all of these things. Or I'm too old. I've been living in the same place too long, whatever it might be. Right here in this audience is one of the women that I revere, I think more than any other woman I can think of in the professional world. At the age of 60, she changed her thoughts, and her life changed dramatically. She started a publishing company called Hay House, which is one of the world's largest publishers of spiritual and higher consciousness materials. She wrote a book called You Can Heal Your Life. She's here today. Her name is Louise Hay. Louise, would you stand up and be acknowledged? Thank you for that. Louise, with a great number of people from all over the world, just celebrated her 80th birthday. So, I should look so good even at 60, all right? And I'm just so deeply honored that you're here, dear. Thank you. What happened for me in the next few months was absolutely life-changing. I had a friend tell me who was severely addicted to all kinds of drugs and alcohol, who was basically very close to death. He refused all kinds of treatment. He wouldn't go through the programs and so on. But he read a book, and the book was called the Tao Te Ching. The Tao Te Ching. T-A-O-T-E-C-H-I-N-G. Tao Te Ching. Tao in ancient Chinese means the way, the great way. Te is the term that means the application of or the virtue of. And Ching in ancient Chinese means book. So it's the book for applying the virtue of living the way. That's what this book means. And he told me that, and I thought, I've heard of the Tao Te Ching, I've heard of Taoism, I'm familiar with that. I had read about it when I was in college. I'd even lectured a little bit about it when I was teaching at a university in New York City, at St. John's University. It was something that I had sort of a cursory awareness of. But it wasn't something that I was really profoundly interested in. I was watching a TV show one night, and someone talked about the Tao on there. I walk into a bookstore, and there's a copy of the Tao. This is all happening in the 6 months or so that between when I had left and knowing that it was time for me to detach myself from all of the things that had been so much a part of my life and move on into a new area of my life. So I couldn't resist it any longer, and I said, I really want to read the Tao, and I'm going to take the next year, a full year, and in that year, what I would like to do is I would like to read each verse. There are 81 verses in the Tao Te Ching. You can read it in an afternoon, but you can study it for a lifetime. And in the studying of this, I said I would like to just take those 365 days for the next year, and in every 4 days, I'm going to read one verse. Some of them are only 4 lines long. Some of them are 12, 16 lines long. I'm going to create for myself a way of seeing if I can live this Tao. And what I did was I would read it, then I would meditate on it, I would walk on it, I would go swim on it. When I would do yoga, I would practice it, and then I would sit down after the 4th day. And I had a picture of the man who was considered to be the author of this, although there's no historical actual record of his name is Lao Tzu. This is the visage that I looked at. This is the image of an artist's drawing of Lao Tzu. In ancient Chinese means old man, old man. He was the old man who was living in China in the time of the warring states, and he decided he didn't want any more to do with war and violence and hatred and killing and all of the things that were so much a part of his world. And he got on his oxen and he left, and before he left to go off and be by himself, he dictated some 5,000 Chinese characters, these 81 verses that became the Tao Te Ching. There are some people who call the Tao Te Ching the wisest book ever written. If you Google this thing called the Tao Te Ching, you'll come up with over 1,300,000 hits on the Tao Te Ching. Not only that, there are 14,000 translations of the Tao Te Ching that I have come across. So what I did is I took 10 of those translations, the ones that seem to be the most relevant, the ones that seem to have the most meaning to those people who lived in this part of the Western world, and I combined them into what I consider to be the most useful translation of the Tao Te Ching. And each morning I would get up and I would look at this picture and I would ask, what is it that you would say to the people who are living now at this time, given the conditions that we have in our life right here? What is it you would do? Many people call this a manual for achieving a way of life that literally guarantees integrity, joy, peace, and balance in our life. Now, there was a man who was a contemporary of Lao Tzu. His name was Confucius. He was many years younger than Lao Tzu, but he kept hearing about this old man who had all of this great wisdom. And one day, he decided that he was going to go, legend says, and visit Lao Tzu. And he spent a full day listening to this man, because Confucius was someone in China who was trying to lay down all the rules of etiquette and how to conduct yourself and trying to dictate to the people what they should be. Lao Tzu had nothing to do with any of that. And when he went to see Lao Tzu, he came back and he talked to all of his people. And this is what he said. He said, "Of birds, I know they have wings to fly with. Of fish, that they have fins to swim with. Of wild beasts, that they have feet to run with. For feet, there are traps. For fins, there are nets. For wings, arrows. But who knows how dragons surmount wind and cloud into heaven? This day I have seen Lao Tzu, and he is a dragon." And there he is, a dragon. And a dragon in ancient Chinese was a picture of someone or something that was so mysterious and so difficult to comprehend, because it could always be something else. There was a great teacher who came many years after that. His name was Rumi, who was Jalaluddin Rumi, who was a great poet, a Persian poet in the 14th century. And he had a line. He said, "The day that you were born, a ladder was set up to help you to escape from this world." I believe that the Tao Te Ching and this thing that I have done, this change your thoughts, change your life effort that I spent 1 full year on every single day, doing exactly what I just said, is a ladder that will help you to return. In the Tao, there's a very famous line. The 40th verse of the Tao says, "Returning is the motion of the Tao." Returning is the motion of the Tao. So that all of us came from a divine spiritual essence, invisible. Everything in the world of form emanated from something that is formless. There was a split second when you went from non-being to being. And what Lao Tzu was trying to teach was to be able to return to that place from which you came and live your life from the spiritual perspective and become a God-realized being. Another great poet, T.S. Eliot, once said, "We shall not cease from exploration. And at the end of all of our exploring will be to arrive where we started and to know the place for the first time." For the first time. What I'm asking you to do, and what Lao Tzu seemed to be saying, was learn to die while you're alive, because you will ultimately return. All of us have a return trip, a round trip ticket when we came in, didn't we? But if you could learn to die while you're alive, and there's a great story, I have to tell you this story. I want to read this story to you. It's a way to look at this idea of dying while you're alive. It goes like this. To die while we are alive gives us the only opportunity we will ever have to get outside of this package that houses us temporarily. There's an ancient parable that repeated generation after generation by the spiritual masters of India, which illustrates this point. Listen to this wonderful story. A traveler from India went to Africa to acquire some local products and animals, and while in the jungle, he saw thousands of beautiful, multicolored talking parrots. He decided to capture a talking parrot and take it back as his pet. At home, he kept his parrot in a cage, and he fed him, and he gave him wonderful seeds and honey, and played music for his pet, and generally, he treated him very well. When it was time for the man to return to Africa 2 years later, he asked his parrot if there was any message that he could deliver to the parrot's friends who were back in the jungle. Well, the parrot told his master to say that he was very happy in his cage and that he was enjoying each day and to convey his love. Well, when the traveler arrived back in Africa, he delivered the message to the parrots back in the jungle. Just as he finished his story, a parrot with tears welling up in his eyes fell over dead. The man was alarmed, and he decided that the parrot must have been very close to the parrot in the cage, and that this was probably the reason for the sadness and for his demise. When the traveler returned to India, he told his pet what had happened. As he finished his story, the pet parrot's eyes welled up with tears, and he kneeled over dead in his cage. The man was astounded, but he figured that his pet died from the despair of hearing of the death of his close friend back in the jungle. The trader opened up the cage and tossed the dead bird outside onto the trash heap. Immediately, the pet parrot flew up to a branch on the tree outside. The trader said to him, "So you're not dead after all. Why did you do that? You tricked me." And the parrot responded, "Because that bird back in Africa sent me a very important message." What was the message? The trader wanted to know. He told me that if you want to escape from your cage, you must die while you're alive. We must indeed die while we are alive in order to be able to look back at our waking consciousness and see ourselves trapped in our cage, which in our case is our body. And then we will see how unnecessary it is to remain caged. Isn't that a great story? I love that story. Yeah, you can applaud. What I encourage you to do is to create for yourself a sacred space. And in this sacred space, I would like you to place everything that has energy value to you. Photographs. I have this photograph that I looked at every day for 1 year and began to talk to after a while. It's a little weird, but you begin to get this idea. And those of you who wonder why I am wearing no shoes, I'd like you to know that where I live, you never walk into a sacred space with your shoes on. It would be considered dishonorable to do so. And to me, this stage, this setting, this beautiful place, and this beautiful symbol is a sacred, sacred space. I live without shoes. I heard it said once that if you wear shoes everywhere you go, the whole earth will feel like leather. And it's nice to feel what the earth feels like and to feel that naturalness. So in that sacred space, you will feel the energy of the photographs, of any mementos that you have, of pictures of your children, of drawings, of statues, of anything at all that you can think of. I have a beautiful sacred space, and it calls me. And as it calls me, when I go into that place that is so profoundly sacred to me, the most beautiful things begin to happen for me, particularly in the middle of the night when no one else is up, and I feel closest to God, and I feel closest to this beautiful old man who sent so many important messages to me through his Tao Te Ching and in my meditations to help me to create this program, Change Your Thoughts, Change Your Life, Living the Wisdom of the Tao. What I would like to do now is to look at some of the key thoughts that I would like you to think about and consider changing as you as you become a person who becomes more God-realized, that is, someone who has died but stayed alive and returned and went back on that return trip. The first of these thoughts to change is to change the idea that I can't trust in my own nature to I trust in my own nature. Did it ever occur to you that you have a nature? That nature is so profound and is always calling you. You know it. No one else can know it. No one else can impose it on you. No one else can tell you what it is that you feel in here that you know is why you're here and what you're doing here. There's no one else can explain that or explore that with you. You can't share it. Everything in the universe has a nature. Your dog has a nature. A crocodile has a nature. A duck has a nature. A crow has a nature. Everything has its nature. Everything has a dharma, including you. But what we've learned and we've grown up to believe is that I can't trust in that nature. My nature, to trust in your nature, to know that you came from a divine place of well-being and to trust in it. Listen to this, verse 38 of the Tao, a few lines. The great master follows his own nature and not the trappings of life. A truly good man is not aware of his goodness and is therefore good. Think about yourself. The first moment of life, the very first moment, that speck when you went from nowhere, N-O-W-H-E-R-E, to now here, N-O-W-H-E-R-E, from nowhere to now here. Same thing, just a little question of spacing, just a little different spacing, all right? So you went from nowhere, now you're in now here, and where do you think you're going? Nowhere. Right? Back to nowhere. Who out there watching, who in this audience isn't going back to nowhere? That's where we're all headed, back to nowhere. So in that split second, then you lived inside your mother's womb for 9 months. And in that 9-month period of time, you trusted your nature. You didn't have a sonogram and say, oh my God, I don't have a nose. This is very scary. What if it doesn't show up on time? Or you didn't do any of that. You trusted completely in your own nature, right? And so did your mother. There's very little that you can do because what you were to become, everything that this physical body needed was all handled in there. And also, beyond what was needed for your physical world and what Lao Tzu called the world of the 10,000 things. The 10,000 things. There's 10 zillion things, obviously, in the physical world, but that's how he named it, the world of the 10,000 things. And in that world of the 10,000 things, everything returns back to its source. But while you're in that place, and why wouldn't you believe, even maybe for a second, that not only was my physiology all handled for me, but everything else that I needed, if I could just stop interfering with it and stop other people from doing it, that everything I needed. And that's a big part of understanding change your thoughts, change your life. It's a big part of that. The idea that I have a nature that I can trust, not something that I have to be afraid of, and I can stop letting other people interfere with it as well. So what happens? We go through those 9 months, totally uninterrupted. We have no questions. Everything works out. And then what? We say the very first thing, we pop out after 9 months, we'll take over from here. That was good work. Nice work, God. Thank you very much. And so what we'll do is just sort of edge you out of here, you know. So we edge God out. We take on an ego, E-G-O. And we edge out and we say, we'll take over. And we have an ego, and this ego, what this ego does is it takes on a set of beliefs. And these beliefs are that I am what I have, that I am what I do, that I am what other people think of me. So we're raised to believe that the more stuff I accumulate, the more things that I get, this is who I am. The more that people like me, this is what I'll get, and on it goes. I want to tell you a story. It's a story of one of my children. Her name is Tracy. We lived in Detroit when she was born. She came in as a little rebellious. She came in the middle of the Detroit riots when they said nobody is allowed to go out. Anybody that goes out is going to be arrested. And she said, this would be a good time for me to show up. Which is exactly what she did. So when she showed up, after about the second or third year, Tracy went to preschool. And she came home from preschool. She was about 3. And in that time she came home and she said, she handed me a paper, and it had a gold star at the top of the paper. And I looked at it and I said, and she said, Daddy, I got a gold star, I got a gold star. I said, I'm not really interested in gold stars. I said, but what are you doing? What is this? What? She said, well, we did something in school called adding, and I got them all right, and I know how to. I said, adding? I can't believe, you're 3. You can't learn to add when you're 3. And I went through this whole long thing about adding and how terrific it was, and she kept saying, Daddy, the gold star, excuse me, but I was the only one in the class that got a gold star. I got them all right. I said, you know, Tracy, I said, honey, I said, some people just need to have gold stars, and teachers sort of like to give it out and make that the reason why you're doing something. I said, and set you apart from everybody else. I said, but your dad doesn't really care much about that and how you stack up with others, and they're going to be, I'm more interested in what you're learning. And she said, okay, she was used to that. She had a weird daddy, and she knew that. So about another month or so, she came home with a paper that had looked like it had a gold star on it, but it had obviously been taken off. Her little thumbprints were all over, but there was a place where there had been a gold star. It was taken off. And I said, what's this? Oh, she said, we're now doing subtraction. And I said, subtraction? That's amazing. And I took over by her dresser. I said, you know that money you've got in your piggy bank? I put it in my pocket. I said, that's called subtraction. Isn't that great? And she said, give me that money back. And we talked about subtraction. Finally, I couldn't take it anymore. I said, honey, what happened? What was this? What was here at the paper? And she said, oh, she said that. She said, the teacher gave me one of those gold stars. I said, really? I said, well, what happened to it? Oh, she said, I took it off. I said, well, what'd you do with it? She said, I gave it back to her. I said, well, what did you tell her? She said, oh, I told her to give it to someone who needs that sort of thing. True story. Yeah. And there she is. She's standing right here. She's going to be 40 this year, my daughter Tracy. So what we have to do is learn how to take this ego of ours, this part of us that believes that who we are is what we have and what we do and what other people think of us. But remember, if you grow up believing that you are what you do, then when you don't, you aren't. And if you believe that you are what you have, when it's gone, you aren't. And if you believe that you are what other people think of you, your reputation, which we raise people to believe, I have to be concerned with what other people think of me. Take this ego and retrain it. And one of the ways that you do to retrain it is, first, you take this idea that the ego has of fear. What are you afraid of? Anybody out there, what are you afraid of? Shift from fear to curiosity. Become curious about what you're afraid of. That's what Lao Tzu taught me. Become curious about what you're afraid of. You're afraid of flying? Get curious about that. Get interested in that. You're afraid of snakes, you're afraid of disapproval, you're afraid. Just shift from fear and say, I'm going to become more curious about what I'm afraid of. And then take all of the things that you're attached to, like all of your photographs, like all of your furniture, like all of your clothing, like all of the stuff that you find so much attachment to, and start letting it go. Mm-hmm. Start letting it go. You know, the day that I turned that key on May the 11th in 2006, I didn't even know where it was going. I just knew there was a shift taking place. I felt freer than I'd ever felt, I think, in my life. In my mid-60s, out there on a whole new adventure. And here we are talking about it on national television, on PBS. Take that idea that you have to be attached to things and know that you came in with nothing, with no thing. And you're going to leave with nothing, with no thing. And understand that your life is a parenthesis in eternity. Live there without attachments. And then take your need to be in control of yourself, of others, of the situation, and shift from control to trust. Begin to have a trust. Lao Tzu is profound about this, and each one of the 81 verses, it comes up about 60 times as you look at letting go and letting God, allowing yourself to trust in your nature, allowing yourself to no longer believe that everything has to be controlled by me and that other people no longer have to be in control of me as well. Begin to trust, just like you did for the first 9 months. You trusted. Your nose showed up. Your height showed up. Your eyes showed up. Whatever. It all showed up. It's all perfect. It's all divine. So why not wander through your life and have this wonderful, peaceful knowing that it's all fine? And finally, shift from your sense of entitlement. Nobody can treat me that way. I'm entitled to have this. Well, I paid for that. I let go. I mean, that in 1 year, I let go of all of my entitlements. I don't feel I'm entitled to anything. I'm just here. Shift from entitlements to radical humility. Lao Tzu speaks about it so often. Stay humble. Stay low. The greatest leaders are the ones who do the least. The ones who stay back and just model and allow. And at the end of the day, in one of the verses of the Tao, it says, the people will say, we did it ourselves. We did it ourselves. In verse 49 of the Tao Te Ching, here's an exact quote. The sage is kind to the kind and kind to the unkind because the nature of his being is kindness. And also, be wise and help all beings impartially, abandoning none. You know what I do? Just before I did this program, I have to admit I was nervous. I was humbled by it. Like who are you, Wayne Dyer? Who are you to read the Tao and believe that you can interpret it on television and interpret it in a book and spend a year and say, like, I got real humble with that. And you know what I say? Tao, which is just another word for God or source or Krishna or Allah or whatever you want to call it, guide me. Guide me now. I have that awareness before I come out. If you knew, it says in the Course in Miracles, if you knew who walked beside you at all times on this path that you have chosen, you could never experience fear or doubt again. I remember Mother Teresa saying to a dear friend of mine who was asking what could he do? What could he do to do something for her? He was, his name was Pat McMahon. He was on KTR radio in Phoenix. And finally Mother Teresa said to him, you can do something for me. She said, tomorrow morning, get up at 4 a.m. and go out onto the streets of Phoenix and find someone who's living there who believes that he's alone and convince him that he's not. That's what you can do. That's how saints talk. That's how Lao Tzu spoke. Okay, let's go on to the next thought, to change. So you're changing from not trusting in your nature to trusting in your nature. You change your thought from I need more to what I call living contentment. What is this thing about more? It's the mantra of the ego, isn't it? I have to have more. I have to collect more stuff. I have to have more friends. I have to have more money. It's more, 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 more. When where you came from nowhere. You don't need anything. It's a continuous bombardment that we are all exposed to in this whole world of believing that we have to have more. It's one of the reasons why I love public television so much. You don't see ads on PBS. You don't have to be constantly exposed to the idea that you have to have more and you have to get more, and if you don't have this, then you're not complete, and so on. So we get bombarded with this idea of attracting more. And Lao Tzu says, live contentment. Live in a state of being contented. Here's verse 81, the last verse of the Tao Te Ching, my favorite translation of it, and I put it right into the book. Sages do not accumulate anything, but give everything to others. Having more, the more they give. It's a great lesson. My son Sands, who's, we're very, very close. We just spent a couple of months together over in Maui, just being together, just being. It was a divine time. And he came home with, it was last summer, he came home with 4 T-shirts that he loved. And I said, well, honey, I said, which one do you like the best? He said, well, that one over there, that blue one, it's got the writing, and it's got the drawing, and it's got a surfer, and it's got, I said, that's great. I said, I'd like to have that one. He said, no, Dad, that's my favorite. That's the one I like the best. I said, I know. I said, that's the one, would you mind if I had that one? He said, I would mind a lot if you had that one. He said, maybe you can have one. I'm not so crazy about this one over here. I said, so you're going to give me something you don't like? You know, I said, that's the one. I love that because we have the same taste. Could I have that one? He said, Dad, you're crazy. He said, you can't have my favorite T-shirt. I said, well, I want you to think about that. I want you to think about detaching and letting go and not needing to have more. And he's heard me talk about this stuff his entire life. So finally, he just, you know, I went in and I tried it on and I said, this thing looks so great. Looking in the mirror, you know, he said, Dad, that really is mine. I said, yeah. I said, but you're going to give it to me. He said, no. I said, yeah, well, just think about it, you know, because I'm your dad and I'd really like to have this. And so he reluctantly parted with it. And so that evening, I was still wearing the shirt. And he looked at me and he said, oh, that's my shirt. I said, you know, Sands, I said, you gave me the shirt. I said, I'm going to wear this shirt until you are happy that I have your favorite shirt. I'm never going to take it off until you are happy. He said, well, you'll be wearing that shirt a long time. I said, well, that's okay. So I wore it the next day. I got up. I slept in it that night. I got up I did. I got up the next morning. I put it on, and that Sands would come in and he'd look at me. I said, oh, you're still not happy that you gave me something that you really love, because this is what it really means to be a sage. This is what it means to be a divine being, to be someone who's willing to depart with not the things they don't like, but what they do like. I wore it the next day. I wore it the next day. I wore it for 2 weeks. Take it off only to wash it, put it right back on. 2 solid weeks. Each one of my children will tell you. Finally, one day he said, Dad, I'm so happy. I am so thrilled that you have that T-shirt. I said, oh, that's great. I can finally take this thing off. I'm going to just give it away. But it's like, what a great lesson in that. The idea that you take, you know, there's a rule. It's called the 80-20 rule. And in the 80-20 rule, it says, everything that you have, all of your stuff, 20% of it is what you use. All of your clothes in your closet, 20%. You just keep using the same 20% over and over. 80% of the clothing that you have in your closet for so many people is something that you never use. You don't wear. You look at it, you store it, you think, well, there might come a day, oh, I can't part with that, even though you've been carting it around. Every time you move it and you put it. Take the 80% that you don't use, says Lao Tzu, and give it away. Give it away. Lao Tzu said that when your cup is full, stop pouring. When your cup is full, stop pouring. We have an obesity crisis in the United States, in the Western world. The obesity crisis can be handled if you just read the Tao. If you realize, in verse 33, it says, if you realize you have enough, you are truly rich. If you could just learn something called portion control, where you just take a bite and you say, is my cup full? Stop pouring. Stop pouring. In other words, instead of filling yourself with that which is already a surplus, in the Tao it teaches us to take surpluses and to reduce them, and to take deficiencies and increase them, so that we create balance in our lives, to be in balance. You can take the jewelry that you don't use. You can take the clothing, and then once you've given away the 80% that you don't use, take one of the things that you really like and practice giving that away. It's such a wonderful way. Listen to this poem. It was written by a great Persian poet named Hafiz. It says, even after all this time, the sun never says to the earth, you owe me. Just look what happens with a love like that. It lights up the whole sky. It lights up the whole sky. There's no owing. There's no owing. You don't have to be, you can practice living a state of contentment. This was so powerful for me. You just can't imagine how good it felt for one entire year to walk through every day and say, I'm content, I'm content. I start out every morning of my life. The first words, Hafiz says, if there's only one prayer that you say every day, make it thank you. Just say thank you. That's how I start. Wake up, thank you, God. Thank you. Thank you, Source. Thank you, Tao. Whatever you want to call. The opening line of the Tao says, the Tao that can be named is not the Tao. As soon as you put a name on it, it dissolves. There's no name for it. It's just endlessly, invisibly, constantly in a state of creating out of a state of love. The next thought that the Tao teaches us to change your thoughts, change your life. You really do. See, so much of the previous PBS specials that I've done on inspiration and intention, these were teaching people generically how to think differently. What Lao Tzu taught me was what to specifically think in place of thinking that. Instead of thinking that I don't trust my nature, he said, trust your nature. Instead of saying, I need more, he said, you need less. More is less. That comes right out of the Tao. Next thought. Move from thinking in a rigid way to thinking and being flexible, soft, and allowing. From rigidity to softness. What a wonderful transformation that is. I was standing looking with my son Sands, and we were on Maui, and we were looking at water. As water was going against some rocks and some cliffs and so on. And in these pictures, in this moment, I said to my son, I said, which do you think is stronger? The water or the cliff? The water or the rocks? Which one do you think is more powerful and stronger? And he said, well, he said the rocks, obviously they're stronger and they're bigger and all. I said, water is very, very patient, isn't it? How much chance do those rocks have if they want to survive? I mean, what chance do they have? That would, and Lao Tzu is speaking to us about understanding our nature by examining how nature works and then making it apply to our thoughts. So that a soft thought, a thought that isn't a rigid thought, a thought that doesn't say you have to be this way or you have to be that way, a thought that is not stiff, a thought that water, there are so many references to water and what we can learn from water. You're 75% water. The planet is 75% water. We are water. The rest of us is just muscled water. It's all water. And water is soft. Water can enter anywhere. You get into a conflict with somebody else and you picture yourself as water. You can enter with water in any place that there's an opening. If you can visualize yourself as a being who moves into the space of water, if you can see yourself that way, you can just enter into those places in the people that you love, in your children, in your spouse, in anyone at all, and enter there softly. Here's verse 8. The supreme good is water, which nourishes all things without trying to. And verse 78, right smack out of the Tao. Nothing in the world is softer and weaker than water. But for attacking the hard, the unyielding, nothing can surpass it. There is nothing like it. Here it is. I asked when they designed this set, this beautiful set, and thank you designers for this, I asked if I could have water on the stage. They did it. They figured it out. There's Now, I'm going to try to get some of this water, okay? So you get down here and you just, I'm going to just scoop this up. And okay, now tighter you hold it, the less chance you have of doing anything with it, isn't it? How can I experience water? The way to experience water is to just get soft, just get unbending. And there it is. That's what water is. The minute I grasp it, the minute I try, and Lao Tzu is saying the same thing is true in everything in your life. The more you grasp, the more you try to hold on to it, the more you try to be rigid with it, the less control you have of it. The softer you are, the less rigid you are, the more flexible you are as a person, the more you can accomplish. And this is a great way to practice in parenting as well. And this idea that a rigid thought, how many times have you heard this idea that if I tell you something, I'm going to stay consistent with it? We have a set of rules, these are the rules, and we'll do it this way. In the Tao, it says the more rules you make, the more rule breakers you create. It's true. The more rules you have in your house about how everything has to go. We had in our house, my wife would have a big jar of M&Ms. Peanuts, all these different multicolored ones. And the kids in our house, because we didn't feed them sugar and we didn't give them sodas and stuff like that. So they were just more like a decoration. Every once in a while someone would take them. They'd hardly ever be replaced. Now when we had kids come over to our house who weren't ever allowed to have such horrible things, you should have seen their behavior. They would scoop them up, they'd be putting them in their pockets, and they'd get their purses, and they'd open it up, and, the whole thing would be empty. I said, what are you doing? He said, well you mean you could just have these whenever you want them? I said, well, we don't really have any rules about that. It's just, it's not something that we encourage or discourage. It's just there. It's like Emerson had a wonderful line. He said, a foolish consistency is the hobgoblin of little minds. A foolish consistency, a rigid consistency. So that there are many people who will say, if I say it on Monday, you can be absolutely certain that on Wednesday, I'm going to believe the same thing, regardless of what might happen on Tuesday. Now, Tuesday might have something real that you might want to be changing your mind. You might want to say, I thought that this time, but now I've seen this, and now we can shift. And you can see how this can become and so much about the Tao is on leadership. Leadership in the family, leadership in the community, leadership geopolitically. Less rigidity, more openness, more willingness to listen and say, I changed my mind. Because a foolish consistency is the hobgoblin of little minds. And what I believed on Wednesday has changed because of what happened on Tuesday. Now, another important thing to say to your children, to your friends, to your lover, to your spouses, to whomever, to the people you work with, words that we're so terrified to say, but which give us a sense of living with the Tao. I don't know. I don't know. I'll look it up. Say it. I don't know. Doesn't hurt. Say it again. I don't know. Isn't it fearful? I mean, so many people, and it's like very freeing because my kids ask me something, and I say, I don't know. They say, Dad, you know everything. You know everything. I say, well, I don't know that, and I'll look it up, or we'll try to find an answer to that. But I don't quite know. I know that I spent 20 years running. And I ran every day for 20 years, for 22 years, without missing a day. 8 miles, never missed a day. That's rigid, all right? Some call that obsessive. But you brush your teeth every day, I used to say, and you don't call that obsessive. And you go to the bathroom every day, and you don't say, well, he's obsessively doing that again today. You don't do that. But anyway, what I learned is that even in the world of exercise, there are certain things that are built in to make us rigid, to make us stiff, to make us hard. And we lift, and we run, and we kick, and this is what we call working out. There's another kind of working out that is ancient. It goes back to the time of Lao Tzu and before, which is called yoga. And yoga means union. It means union with your source. And when you do yoga, you can stay in the same place. You can do the equivalent of 8 miles. When I used to run 8 miles, I had to run 4 miles that way, turn around, 4 miles back. And I'd be sweating. Now I can do yoga, and I can just stand in one place. And in 90 minutes, by being supple, by making myself stretch, by not being hard and rigid, I can get that out there. I can get that leg up. I can do these kinds of things. And 90 minutes later, it's like I'm totally sweating, and I feel so different. I used to, when I would go out at night to eat or something, after running so many miles, running marathons and doing those things, I'd go to get up and it would be, okay, It's going to take a little while, because everything was so, that doesn't happen anymore, because I've given up hard. I've given up being rigid and substituted it for being supple, for being flexible, for living a life in which I don't have to always be so fierce. Listen to this verse of the Tao Te Ching. It's one of my all-time favorites, verse number 76. A man is born gentle and weak. At his death, he becomes hard and stiff. All things, including the grass and the trees, are soft and pliable in life, dry and brittle in death. Stiffness is thus a companion in death. Flexibility is a companion in life. And it's not just for how you exercise, it's how you think, how you think. In front of my place on Maui, there is a beautiful set of 11 or 12 palm trees. And these are like 30, 40, 50 feet tall. They've been there for, I don't know how long, decades. And when the winds come and when the storms come, the storms will blow them over. There they are, watch. And they're just these amazing elastic things. I learned so much from these things. I go out there, when I wrote the essay in the book on the verse 73, I just went out there with the palm trees and I would just commune with these palm trees, and they go all the way up and then they come all the way back. That's a symbol for how we need to think in our own lives. In verse 73 it says, "It is heaven's way to conquer without striving. It does not ask, yet it is supplied with all that it needs. It does not hurry, yet it completes everything on time." One of my favorite lines from the Tao, one of the favorite beliefs from the Tao is this, that you're doing nothing. All of you, you're doing nothing. You're just being done. Just like you were the first 9 months of your life. You think you're out there and you're making this happen and you're making that happen and you've got all these rigid things and you have to apply your life this way. You're not doing anything any more than you were having your fingernails show up when they were supposed to. And look at you, look at all of you, look around, you know, it's like, you know, what held it in yesterday, you know? I don't know, I'm not doing anything. They fall out and they don't fall out no matter how hard I try to keep them in there. Finally, my kid said, give it up, give it up. So I was over in England and they told me that I couldn't take my shampoo bottles on the plane. And there's nothing you can do about it. I said, yes, there is. I'll just shave my head. I no longer need shampoo. Okay, so we want to move from stiffness to flexibility. The next thought that I'd like to see us change, that the Tao taught me so much, was living by interfering, to shift that to living by not interfering. Do you know that every one of your children have the anchor of the universe located within them? And that Khalil Gibran, this is a paraphrase, he said, your children are not your children. They are the products of life's longing for itself. They come through you, but not for you. They're not there for you. So what are you doing interfering in their lives? Now, I'm not talking about letting them play out in the traffic or play at the edge of a swimming pool if they don't know how to swim. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about, I called this when I was working on this and living this and practicing this for that full year of 2006, the bite your tongue, zip your lip verses of the Tao. Verse 29 of the Tao. Do you think you can take over the universe and improve it? I do not believe it can be done. Everything under heaven is a sacred vessel and cannot be controlled. Trying to control leads to ruin. Trying to grasp, we lose. Allow your life to unfold naturally. Allow other people's lives to unfold naturally as well. We have parents, I see them a lot. They're called helicopter parents. because they're always hovering. They're hovering over their kids, and they're telling them what to do and what not to do. And my son came over from England, my son Shane, and he was going to get ready to go to college, in America. And my wife said to me, so you're going to take him and show him about registration, right? I said, oh yeah, I'll be doing that. She said, well, make sure that you help him because he doesn't have any idea how to register at the school, this great big school with thousands of people. I said, yeah, and I do, right? I would know how to register kids at school, you know. And so Shane got in the car, and I said, it's all going to be fine. It'll all be fine. And we drive over to the campus, and I drop him off, and I have my tennis racket in the back. And he said, where are you going? I said, well, I'm a prophet. I said, I get paid by the thought. And I have a tennis match, and then I have to walk on the beach so that I get paid by the thought. He said, but what about the registration? I said, well, the registration, I said, you'll do a lot like I did when I learned to register. He said, well, what do you mean? I said, you'll just go up to the people and say, where is registration? And they'll say, it's over there where all of those people are all lined up. Because I remember those days in a college of 40,000 students or so, finding out how to register. Tracy, did I take you to register, honey? No. So he said, you mean you're just going? I said, yeah, you just go with it. I said, you want daddy to walk with you over and take you through graduate? You're 18 years old and you want daddy to register you? He said, oh, no, I wouldn't want that. So we got home at the end of the evening, when I got back home, and my wife had said to me, she said, did you help Shane at registration? Oh, I said, I gave him so much help, probably the most help he ever had in his life. I taught him how to do things for himself, and so that I wouldn't have to be interfering and hovering over and figuring it all out for them. My children know that when their science project comes up, that I'm there for consultation, but I passed science. I got through that myself. And you'll be doing your own science project. If I can help you, I'll be happy to help you, but I'm not going to be getting the glue and figuring out how to make a time clock and all of that. I said, you know, just look at a clock. That's how you tell time for me, whatever it might be. And it's not an uncaring, and it's not a callous attitude at all. It's an awareness that your children have the anchor of the universe located within them. That's what Lao Tzu said. Now, my dear friend, who I love so much, she's right here in the audience, Carrie, right there, Carrie Evans from Maui. She has two beautiful little daughters. And she asked me if I would watch them one afternoon when my grandson, Carter, was visiting. I said, I'd be happy to watch them. She said, but you don't understand. I mean, they're gonna do this and they're gonna do that. I said, you just go off, and she was studying for an exam. I said, you go study, do whatever you have to do. I can handle 3 little kids out at the swimming pool for 3 or 4 hours. I can handle that. So she went off, very nervous, gave me lists, told me what to do, what they might say, what they might not say. And then if she says, now if Kylie says this, you tell Kylie, and if Kamiley says it was Kylie, Kamiley, and Carter. All right? So they go out there, and right here, there's a little pool over here, a little swimming pool. And I watch them over in the swimming pool, and Kylie takes the water and splashes my grandson, Carter, and splashes Kamiley, and Kamiley comes over to me and runs over within 2 minutes. Says, Kylie splashed me. Well, of course, I'm working on the Tao. Non-interference. And I said, splashing, honey, is in the way of things. When you're near water, splashing will take place. She said, yeah, but she splashed me. I said, you'll probably work this out. This will all be fine. And she stood there for the longest time with her little lip and so on, and finally she realized she wasn't getting anywhere with me. She went back. Before you know it, one of them had taken, now Kylie and Kamiley are teaming up against Carter. And they pushed him under or whatever. Now one of them is 5, and one of them is 4, and one of them is 7 or 8. And Carter comes running over as fast as he can, runs over. He calls me Bampa. And I'm Grandpa. Bampa. Bampa, Bampa, Miley pushed me under the water. I said, Carter, I'm a Taoist master. But Bampa, she pushed me. She put me under the water. I said, You'll just have to work this one out, Carter. I'm a Taoist master. This went on all for the first hour or so. But I noticed as I was less interfering and less interfering that they were working it out. They tried again after a few times. They'd come over and they wanted this and they wanted them pushed and wanted that. But each time when I let them know that I was watching and making sure they were safe, but I wasn't going to interfere. I wasn't going to resolve it. I wasn't going to settle their disputes for them. I wasn't going to be a helicopter parent, even for an afternoon. And the way that it resolved itself was they have the anchor of the universe within them. They have a nature. They know what to do. One of my favorite things always to say to my children when there's a conflict is, you know what the right thing to do is. What do you think? You know. You have it in your heart. You are a divine being. They all know that. I've said those words to them over and over again. You'll figure it out. You'll work it out. Not I'm going to interfere. I'm going to tell them what to do. You can practice this so many places, so many ways in your life, particularly as parents, even in business. It's very important in businesses to allow the people to say at the end of the day, right out of the Tao, oh, we did that ourselves. We did it ourselves. In the Tao it says, there's a time for everything, and everything in its time. There's a time for everything. Listen to this. There's a time for being ahead, and a time for being at peace. There's a time for being in motion, and a time for being at rest. There's a time for being vigorous, and a time for being exhausted. And in the Bible, to everything there is a season, a time for every purpose under the sun. I practice, this was so helpful to me, particularly as I do my yoga practice. And in my yoga practice, it's there are some very exhausting postures. I do this Bikram hot yoga, all right? So it's 105 or between 105 and 110 for 90 minutes. And there's one that I used to hate. It's called triangle, you know? And so you put your foot out here and then you do this and then you get yourself up and you go all the way down and you get yourself in balance like here. So you balance down and you take your arms out here and then you take these like this and it's 105 degrees in there. You take one and you're looking up here at your arm and you look and you look and you look and then you bring it back and it lasts a full minute. And I used to just wait for that minute to be over. Oh my God, when are they going to bring me out of this posture? It was so exhausting. I started practicing what the Tao teaches. And I remember there's a time for being exhausted. There's a time for that. And as I practiced that, I said, and there's a time for being at rest. And it's coming, hopefully soon. But in your life, there's an awareness that there is a time for all the things that go on that you think shouldn't be happening. In the Tao, it says that hidden in all misfortune is good fortune. Hidden in the misfortune that you have is good fortune, because no storm can last forever. Even nature cannot create a storm that lasts forever. Ultimately, hidden within every storm is calmness. Hidden within every flood is drought and dryness. Hidden within all of the storms of your life is the peace that you desire. And it leans on you if you stop telling yourself and just let yourself go with it, to be at harmony with it, rather than trying. You can see why this is called the wisest book ever written, and we're just touching on it here, just touching on this. Lao Tzu was green before Al Gore. He was. This is verse 39 of the Tao Te Ching. When man interferes with the Tao, the sky becomes filthy, the earth becomes depleted, the equilibrium crumbles, creatures become extinct, therefore nobility is rooted in humility. Finally, I'd like to say to you, in understanding this idea of the Tao, is to take time yourself for being in nature. Take an hour a day. Every day of your life, take an hour a day, no matter how busy you are, no matter what scheduling that you have, to get out in nature. Walk barefoot on the grass. Walk barefoot. It's one of the great ways to overcome an inability to sleep at night. Just go out when you can't sleep and just walk on the grass, walk on the earth, and reconnect yourself. Now, go out and be with the tree and look at what you can learn from nature. Look at these trees. Look at these animals. You can study, look at that. You can study a flower like that is so magnificent as it's unfolding. That's an actual photograph of this thing growing and unfolding there. Be with that. You have much to learn from nature, from water, from the sky, from the winds, from the trees, from the birds. The more you do it, the more you see yourself in all of them. The more you'll feel yourself as a connected being, living the Tao. Another thought to change. To change from thinking big to thinking small. It's so much of the Tao has in it statements that seem so paradoxical and so confusing to us. More is less. Less is more. Think small and get great things done. Accomplish great things. Listen to verse 64 of the Tao Te Ching. A tree that fills a man's embrace grows from a seedling. A tower 9 stories high starts with 1 brick. And here's the most famous line out of the Tao. A journey of 1,000 miles begins with what?
The first step.
1 first step. Okay? So today I can stand up here on this stage in this beautiful sacred place, in this beautiful yin-yang symbol, on this incredibly beautiful set that feels so much like nature. And I can say to you that in a very short time, this year, I will have completed 20 years without taking a drink of alcohol. 20 years, okay? Thank you. Now that's big. That's big. Because I drank every day. Not to get drunk, but I drank every day. 2 or 3 beers every evening after running, and it was like, and I couldn't remember a day when I hadn't had, I thought back 10 years, 12, I couldn't think of a day, not one day in the previous decade or two that I had not had a beer, or several beers. So that's big. And if I would have tried, if I'd have said to myself 20 years ago, Wayne, you're going to quit drinking for the next 20 years, I would have gone immediately and had a drink. Because it's just too big, isn't it? It's just too big. You don't do big things. You do small things and thus accomplish great things. It's a very important distinction to make. Whatever it is that you would like to create or contribute or become in your life, take 1 step. How did I let drinking go for 20 years? And I don't even know about tomorrow. I never think about tomorrow and whether I'm going to have a drink. All I know for sure is that this won't be the day. I do it 1 day at a time. That's how you overcome anything called an addiction in your life. You take it, you reconnect yourself to the source from which you came, which is a source of what? Well-being, isn't it? And you get back and return, get on the return trip and saying, I am connected to well-being. And I'll do this 1 day, 1 hour, 1 minute, 1 second if I have to, at a time. And when you do it, I mean, it's behind in all of the programs for overcoming addictions, and all of the work of Bill W., all of the work of Alcoholics Anonymous, all of the work of any kind of addictions. It isn't just alcohol. It can be food. It can be addiction to your emails. It can be addiction to work. It can be addiction to so many things that so many people find that they can't get past. And to move themselves into a place where I think small. I ran 7 marathons in my running years. And about the 22nd or 23rd mile, you begin to ask yourself about your sanity. And what am I doing here? And my body is breaking down. But the way that you finish the marathon is not by saying, I'm going to run 26 miles. You don't do that, especially when you've still got 5 or 6 to go. You just say to yourself, can I put my foot in front of the next one? Can I take 1 step at a time? Can I do it 1 step at a time? And before you know it, you've accomplished great things. I watched my wife give birth to 4 children right there in her in the delivery room with her. And she does not, you know, when you have a baby, it takes 9 months, doesn't it? You don't say to yourself, oh my God, I gotta have a baby, I gotta get pregnant, I gotta deliver it, I gotta go through labor, because that'll just drive you. And there are people who do that. And it's a torture for them. But I watched her do it one moment at a time in labor. Not what's going to happen an hour from now, what's going to happen this afternoon, am I going to have the, none of that. And she did it all naturally because it was all, and her mind was so strong as she was doing it that I couldn't even penetrate. I couldn't even communicate with her. She was so focused on just being here. She would say, these are not labor pains. These are just signals. Just signal, and I can take this signal. I can do this for 1 minute. I can do this. It's the way everything gets done. I watch the great tennis players on the planet, Roger Federer, Pete Sampras, these people that are really masters at this game that I played for so many years, not even close to those kinds of levels. And they'll be in a tournament, they'll have a seeding, and they'll say, here's the first round, here's the second round, here's the third round. There's no such thing as playing the 4th round before you've played the first round. And then when you get to the first round, you don't go out there and say, well, I've got to beat this person in 3 sets. You say, I'm going to think 1 serve at a time. I'm going to think 1 point at a time. And every great athlete, I don't care who they are, they will always say, I can't think out there in big ways. I can only think small. Thinking small is what gets great things done. Verse 63. Achieve greatness in little things. Take on difficulties while they are still easy. Do great things while they are still small. The sage, one of my daughter's names, the sage, does not attempt anything very big and thus achieves greatness. Greatness comes from being in the moment, here, present, in the now. The sage confronts difficulties but never experiences them. This is the idea of thinking small. And finally, I'd like to see you change from this thought. Change from seeing yourself as separate to seeing yourself as connected to everyone and everything in the universe. Our ego tells us that we are separate, that who we are is this body that we have, and everybody out there is separate from me. Nothing has been more profound and more powerful and important for me than this verse of the Tao Te Ching. This idea that we are all one. That all of us emanated from the same source. And by doing so, by emanating from the same source, we need to see ourselves as connected to every single being, every single person, every single flower, every single tree, every single animal. If you can see yourself in everyone, we're all connected. It makes about as much sense to me to have a smoking section in a restaurant as it does to have a peeing section in a swimming pool, right? Oh, no, kids, no, don't pee over here. We pee over here. Does that make any sense? The Native Americans, one of my favorite quotes, I've used it many, many times. The Native Americans would say, no tree has branches so foolish as to fight among themselves. No tree has branches so foolish as to fight among themselves. We are all branches on a tree called humanity. When you read the Tao, when you read this idea about changing these thoughts and changing your life, you're going to see endless verses that speak to the absurdity of the idea of you having an enemy. The idea that you and anyone else on this planet is an enemy. In the Tao it says, I and enemy cannot exist in the same sentence. And he said, even those who go to war, the ones who will triumph in war are those who go to war without an enemy. And they will treat every victory in war not as something to celebrate, but as a funeral, as an indication that we haven't reached the highest place within ourselves to see that even those people that we judge to be our enemy are really connected to us. And it says in the Tao that a bad man is a good man's job, and a good man is a bad man's teacher. A good man is a bad man's teacher. So finding that and seeing that, listen to verse 10. Carrying body and soul and embracing the one, can you avoid separation? One who heeds this power brings the Tao to this very earth. This is the primal virtue. This was so helpful to me as I thought about it. Remember, I spent 4.5 days on each one of these verses. And in each one of those 4.5 days, I wasn't writing. I wrote the last 4 or 5 hours of those 4.5 days. For 4.5 days, I took that verse and I went out into the world and I looked at everyone that I encountered, everyone that I saw, and I tried to see myself in them. The person that was, dressed differently than I would dress, the person who was not as attractive, the person who was very old, the person who was very young, the person who used language particularly that was possibly offensive. When I would look out there and I would practice not judging, because the only difference between a flower and a weed is a judgment, isn't it? It's just a judgment. It's just a judgment. And if we want to end violence in our lives and in our society, we have to learn to change our thoughts. Remember the dandelions when I was growing up out in Michigan? We had these dandelions. The dandelions would have, at a certain time of the year, they would get all these little fuzz balls at the top of them. The yellow little flower part. I always liked the dandelions. I thought they were really beautiful. And then they have these little fuzz balls. Now imagine if you want to end the problem of dandelions on your lawn, and you see them all out there with all their little fuzz balls. So you go out there and you take a shovel and you turn it upside down and you start smacking all of the dandelions like this. And what do you do when you use violence to attempt to end the presence of these dandelions, which are problems for you on your lawn? Is they all scatter. And then in the spring, guess what you got? You got more. You got new generations of dandelions. There's such a lesson in that, isn't there? There's a great lesson that when we use violence as a means to resolve our disputes, whether it's individually with each other, or whether it's in countries, or whether it's in communities, whenever it is that we resort to that kind of not seeing myself in others, and out of this kind of a consciousness will emerge those people who will ultimately begin to get this. Because if we don't get it, if we don't really get it, civilization as we know it will not survive. It will not survive. We have to learn that the people that we call enemies, no matter how horrendous they may behave toward us, there is still something of us in all of them. And we can figure out a way. Yes, we of course have to defend ourselves, and yes, we don't allow people to push us, or all of those kinds of things, but at a deeper and a higher level, Lao Tzu was asking us to go within and find that place of peace, and try to reach out to that, and help someone to make a U-turn. Those people can be reached, because they have the anchor of the universe located within them. In verse 25 of the Tao it says, thus to know humanity, understand earth. To know earth, understand heaven, which is where earth came from. To know the way, understand the great within yourself. Within yourself. Look within and see it. Now, every single person watching this program will have conflicts with somebody in their life on a fairly regular basis, especially if you're in a marriage or in a partnership of some kind. Certainly if you have children, you're going to have conflicts. Now think about what you do when you have a conflict and that conflict comes to an end. The conflict is over. You've expressed your opinion. You may have yelled at each other, you may have screamed at each other, you may not have understood each other, but it's over now. How do you end the conflict? Lao Tzu says, the person of Tao will eliminate all of the pain, all of the stress, all of the anger, all of the hatred, if they decide to end the conflict with love. Just be the one who ends the silence by saying, we don't agree, but I love you. And it's all over. You have moved a person from staying in the world of the 10,000 things into the world of God, into the world of Source, because the Source has no violence in it. It creates endless numbers of flowers and beings and creations without using any force at all. There's no force there. Here's one of my teachers who lived in Bombay, which is now Mumbai in India. His name was Nisargadatta Maharaj. He said, wisdom is knowing I am nothing. Love is knowing I am everything. And in between the two, my life moves. In between the two. The ability to take a conflict and to end it with love is one of the most powerful things that you can do. It has been a great lesson for me. When we have a conflict, what we do is I will be the person that will pick up that phone. You can be certain of it. I will end that conflict with love. And guess what that does to the conflict? It's over. It's over. You can't pick a fight with someone who just doesn't want to fight anymore, who just sends you love. So I want to summarize some of these thoughts, and there are so many. Change your thoughts based upon the wisdom of the Tao, and your life will change. There's many principles to live by in the Tao. First, remind yourself that there is no way to happiness. Happiness is the way. Bring happiness to all that you do. You accomplish much by trying less. It's so inconsistent, isn't it, with what we live in the Western world. But the less you try, when I go out and swim in the ocean, and I do it almost every day, I try to do between 30 minutes and an hour every day, being out there in that ocean. And I just get out there, and if I try less, my arms just seem to know what to do, and the breathing just all works, and and I can swim all day. As soon as I try, as soon as I struggle, as soon as I start trying, the minute that I move myself into trying, it's like if I were to take this little cap here and drop it right there and say, I'm going to try to pick this up. I'm going to try to pick this up. This is what Lao Tzu was speaking about. So all of this, I'm trying, I'm really trying. All of this is called, in reality, not picking it up. That's what that's called, not picking it up. But when I just get easy and do less. See yourself, the Tao says, in everyone you encounter. A great lesson. Every single being, especially the ones that we read about who we're told are our enemies. See yourself in them. Know that whoever they are, wherever they live, they want what we want. They want what I want. They want to be at peace. They don't want to be always struggling. They don't want to be sick. They just want to be loved, whoever they are. I know the skepticism of that. It's like, yes, but, all of the yes, buts. But if they got it too, see, Lao Tzu wasn't speaking to, well, some are going to get this and some probably won't. He was speaking to all of us. Trust in others, the Tao says, to know what's best for themselves. Trust in that. Trust in the pliability, the flexibility of your babies. God, those little babies, they're so great when they're like, 2 weeks old. You can take their foot, put it behind their neck, stick it around here like this, put it in their mouth. They're so flexible. I mean, you can do anything. You pick them up, you turn them upside down. You watch them when they're starting to learn to walk. And they run, crash, they go down into the walls and all of this. And you think, oh my God, this kid will never walk again. Up they go, and they don't. Trust in their flexibility. Live without attachment and be generous. Be strong by bending. By bending. We need to learn this in our lives. We need to learn this in the world. It's not so important to be right. It's so much more important when you have a choice to be right or to be kind. Always pick kind. Always pick kind. Practice radical humility. Live low. Live low like the ocean. Stay low. And all the streams will come to it. That's why it's so powerful, because it doesn't lord anything over anyone. And rather than looking for miracles, see everything as miraculous. Everything in your life. There was a man who had a Tao experience, what I call a quantum moment. His name was John Newton. He lived back in the beginning of the 18th century. And he was crossing the ocean. He was a slave trader. He had a ship full of human cargo that he was going to trade into slavery in the most hideous practice that was so common at that time in our history. And in the middle of a storm, on his way over there with all of these people, he was 22 years old or 23 years old. And he thought he was going to die, and he thought it was like he must have hit a hurricane or something out there that was before satellites could warn people. And while he thought he was in that state of dying, he took out a pencil and a paper, and he wrote on the back of an envelope, he wrote, "I once was lost, and now I'm found." And it was grace. It was grace that taught my heart to feel. It was grace that brought me home. And when the storm was over, he had a moment. He reconnected to his source. Anybody out there can reconnect to the source, to the Tao, and become a being of Tao. Remember, it's a return trip. And you can make that return trip while you're alive. Remember the parrot. He knows much more than we did. And he returned back to Africa, and he released the slaves, it is said. And for the next 55 years of his life, he shifted and became the most ardent spokesman as an abolitionist to abolish that hideous practice of slavery. That's what he devoted his life to it. A former slave, it's like going from Saul to Paul, from being a person who crucifies and murders Christians to being the author of a big portion of the New Testament as St. Paul. In a moment, it's possible for any of us. And there's a lady who I think has one of the great voices on this planet today. Her name is Cecilia, and she has been traveling with me. She's from Norway. She has sung at conventions and places that I have been. She sings, we call her the nightingale, don't we? She's an angel. She sings like an angel. And she's accompanied by the whales. These whales, these beautiful creatures who are in my front yard every morning on Maui, the humpbacks, who have these beautiful tails that flash, and some days I'll be walking along the beach and I will hear someone say, "Honey," this guy was having on a honeymoon there, and he said, "Honey, come on in. You can hear the whales singing, they're all singing." And she's going, I don't think I want to get my feet wet, and I don't think I get my hair wet. And he said, "No, but you can hear them." And I flew into there with my clothes on and went underneath, and I stayed under there for like an hour, up and back, listening to these sounds of the whales, these beautiful creatures in nature, these natural beings who I feel so connected to and so a part of. And she sings accompanied by the whales. Now, getting those whales into the sound booths and getting the earphones on, very, very difficult. You got to really appreciate what we did here to bring this to you. Right? And here she is. Her name is Cecilia. She sings Amazing Grace, accompanied by the whales. One of my truly favorite people and greatest singers I've known. Cecilia? Thank you. Namaste. I want to close this beautiful presentation on the Tao, Cecilia, with a poem that was written by a woman. Her name is Naomi Long Madgett. She's from Detroit, went to Wayne State University. She was named the Poet Laureate of Detroit, an acclaimed African-American poet. Listen to these words. It sums up all that I've been saying. I wouldn't coax the plant if I were you. Such watchful nurturing may do it harm. Let the soil rest from so much digging and wait until it's dry before you water it. The leaf's inclined to find its own direction. Give it a chance to seek the sunlight for itself. Much growth is stunted by too careful prodding, too eager tenderness. The things we love, we have to learn to leave alone. Thank you. 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 Thank you, thank you, thank you so much. It's been such a wonderful evening. It's the sunlight that becomes the rose. I mean, it's that whole thing that the Tao teaches us, isn't it? That out of the invisibleness, out of the no-thingness, out of the space that has no name, it's the space that's doing nothing, but leaving nothing undone. The Tao does nothing. It leaves nothing undone. And you are from the Tao. I'd like to just, for a few moments, speak about one more thought. I'd like to see you work at changing, to change the thought from notice me, to what Lao Tzu calls living in obscurity, becoming more obscure. We live in a celebrity-obsessed world, don't we? Look at me. Notice me. The Tao teaches something completely the opposite. Listen to the 66th verse of the Tao. Water again. The sea stays low. And because the sea stays low, all of the rivers and all of the streams empty into it. Because it stays humble, because it stays in that place of just allowing everything to come to you. He was trying to teach us the important lesson of letting what we know is coming come to us. I practice this so much more now in my life than I did at one time. I can remember years ago, I had written a book called Your Erroneous Zones back in the 70s, and it stayed on the New York Times bestseller list for something like 27 months. And many weeks it would be number 1, and then it would go down to number 3, and then it would go to number 2, and down to 7, and all of that. And I was doing The Tonight Show in those days and on a regular basis, and so many of the other shows, the Merv Griffin and Phil Donahue and Dinah Shore. I became like a regular on the Dinah Shore. I was like, hobnobbing with Burt Lancaster folks, and what you do is you call and find out where you appear on the bestseller list for the following week on Wednesday. So you call up on Wednesday, not for the Sunday coming up, but for the following week. And I called home, and my ego was pretty strong, and I was very much into a lot of notice me. I really believe that true nobility is not about being better than anyone else now. It's about being better than you used to be. And I think I'm better than I used to be. And I know that I'm better than I used to be in every quality or every characteristic that I hold to be valuable. But in those days, I was into notice me. And I called home, and I had trained my wife to call the New York Times. She had this special number that she could call, and with a certain code, and she could find out where I was going to appear on the bestseller list the following week. So I called her up and I said, where am I on the bestseller list next week? I was out in California doing something, and she said, you're not on the bestseller list. I said, what are you talking about? I was #1 on the bestseller list last week. I said, even my voice changed when I said, what do you mean I'm not on the bestseller list? She said, you're not on the bestseller list, I'm sorry. She said, your book is on the bestseller list. Big distinction there, isn't it? Between believing that this is me and recognizing that you can let go a little bit of that. Listen to verse 66 of the Tao. Why is the sea king of 100 streams? Because it lies below them. Humility gives it its power. That's a very important principle to understand. And I live on the ocean, right next to it. It's my front yard. And always I watch it to learn something from this thing called the ocean, which is the most powerful source of life that we have on the planet. Without it, there's no life on this planet. And because it stays low, so what does this have to say to us? Do you have the capacity to get past that ego need to always be saying, notice me, look how important I am? There's been a proliferation of this lately with this celebrity silly stuff, isn't it? CNN is doing full hour shows on silly little things about what happened to this particular celebrity or what happened to that celebrity, and the celebrity's never even done anything. And there's all of this talk about it, and all of the new magazines. And you go through an airport and you look on the newsstand, and all the same photos, just with different magazines. I don't even know what the names of all of them are, but there's like this huge market now that we have for people to get into a state of notice me, notice me, notice me. And how much do we train our young people, particularly in our schools and so on, that the one who is the star is the one who gets the most attention. The one who is the most important and the most valuable is the one that has the most people liking them and so on. This constant obsession with needing to be noticed, when in fact, what I have found for myself is the happiest moments of my life are when I can do it low and slow and not have anybody out there even know what I'm doing. To be able to, Louise never would have advertised the fact of some of the things I talk about with her generosity. She does it anonymously. It's almost always done in those ways. No, look at me, look and notice me, how important I am, and so on. So much to learn from that kind of wisdom, from that kind of inner connection to the Tao, the ability and the willingness to do it anonymously, to say that you can just get done almost anything that you want to get done if you don't become obsessed with taking credit for it. Remember the movie The Magnificent Obsession? Yeah. A movie made back, I think, in the 50s. And it was really about what was the magnificent obsession. It was the ability to be able to give anonymously. What is Alcoholics Anonymous? It is everybody stays anonymous. Nobody has a title. There's not even anybody in charge. There's no leaders of this. There's no president. There's no vice president. There's no organization. It's just, here's a group of people who just want to help other people whose lives are out of control. So here's a meeting place. And you come, and one day somebody will will chair it, and then somebody else another day will chair it. And one of the things I found that when I attend one of these meetings is that I feel, you'll see so many people who are downtrodden, who feel as if their life has passed them by, who look like they don't have any teeth, they haven't shaved, they're dirty, they're God in disguise. Mother Teresa was asked the question about what she does when she was in Calcutta, and she said, every day, I see Jesus Christ in all of his distressing disguises. All of his distressing disguises. That you can see this source, you can see the Tao, you can see it when, particularly in those who are the most obscure, the most isolated from everyone else. And whenever I go to one of those meetings and I hear people get up and they tell their stories, I feel there's so much presence of the source, of God, of spirit, of Lao Tzu, of Tao, whatever you want to call it, in one of those meetings than I've ever felt in any church. I've never felt the presence of it more. And I encourage you, any of you watching this right now, go to one of those meetings. You don't have to be an alcoholic. You don't have to. I'm not an alcoholic. I don't call myself an alcoholic. I was never out of control. I drank, but I wasn't out of control. And but I still go to those meetings. I have people in my own family that have struggled with addiction, and I go with them, and I sit there and I listen to those stories, and I get shivers down my back when I think about how beautiful it is to be in the presence of people. All they want to do is help each other. There's a movie called My Name is Bill W. James Woods plays it, and James Garner is in it. And his life just got totally out of control with addictions, totally out of control. And then he went to he went to one of these meetings, and he began to realize, and he said, we can actually take these people, and all we have to do is love them. All we have to do is, and he's so excited about the concept of being able to go out there and offer it. And I keep referring to Louise because she's such a hero to me. There was a time back in the 80s when our president wasn't even able to say the word AIDS, was he? I mean, he could come on, and here was this lady who, before this thing became the worldwide phenomenon that it is, was having meetings in her own house and bringing these people, these downtrodden people who had been labeled outcasts in society, and offering them a place to learn how to love each other and to care for each other. This was long before there was any celebrity status associated with trying to end this horrible crisis that our country has and our world has had. There was James Wood, so excited about the idea of we can create a place where we're anonymous. Nobody has to know anything about us. We don't have to say our names. We don't have to say anything. We just have to come there and we can help each other. And before that happened, everybody who got out of control with addictions, particularly with alcohol, would die. There was no cure. There was no cure. And where did they find their cure? They found it in being anonymous. They found it in being obscure. They found it in having no organization. They found it in having no elected representative. They found it in having no rules. There are no rules. You just come and we care. If you've been 1 day or 1 hour sober, or even if you're drunk, you come. We care about you. And you are not that alcohol. Who you are is this divine soul. In the 36th verse of the Tao Te Ching, it says, "The gentle outlast the strong. The obscure outlast the obvious." Try to become a little more obscure, a little less interfering, a little less notice me, a little less, one of the specific kinds of things that you can do is just as you're about, when somebody else is talking, just as you're about to interject what you've been thinking about for the whole time, waiting for them to stop talking, just stop, to bite your tongue and say, "Tell me more." Or, "That's very interesting. I have never heard that point of view before." Even if they totally, completely disagree with everything that you stand for, to be willing to listen, to be able to stop. Practice it. I practiced it when I did these verses of the Tao. I practiced it every single day while I was working on that. Just staying obscure
And for me, that's not always so easy because of just being recognized wherever I go. And if I saw someone who was about to recognize me, I would just put my head down. I would just walk a little bit past them like something. Right now, I just want to be anonymous. Right now, I want to be obscure. The Tao says, storms always end. Verse 23, fierce winds don't blow all morning. A downpour of rain doesn't last all day. Who does this? Heaven and earth. You're already connected to everything you want or need. It will come to you at the exact perfect time, as the rivers and the streams come to the ocean at the perfect time and place. You gotta trust. You gotta know it's going to come to you. You don't have to chase after it. You can become a little less obsessed with your ego and your self-importance and who you are and what you've done, and you can get so much more done. And you know what? It's the most peaceful and sweet, delicious way. It's like the song that Cecilia was singing about the rose. Thank you so much, and God bless you.